Hello and welcome. I'm Beth Wenzel, Senior Project Manager at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, and I'm here to share some updates regarding the design of the aquatic habitat enhancements that we're proposing for Lincoln Park. This project is part of a larger effort to restore the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern. So I'm going to start with a little background on that program and then share a little history so you understand why the river through Lincoln Park is so unique. And then I'll talk a bit more about some of the specific habitat improvements that we're proposing. The Area of Concern program comes out of an international agreement between the United States and Canada, in which each country agreed to identify and then clean up some of the most environmentally degraded areas around the Great Lakes. And of course, the Milwaukee Estuary is one of those sites. This map shows the geographic extents of the Milwaukee Estuary Area of Concern. So, it includes down in the harbor area, but extends all the way up the Milwaukee River, up into Ozaukee County, all the way to up into Cedar Creek, as well as, the other tributaries to the Milwaukee River, including Lincoln Creek, the Menominee River, and parts of the Kinnickinnic River. Majority of the work that goes into restoring an area of concern is cleaning up contaminated sediments. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that work, but I do want to just mention that there is a big design being developed to remediate some contaminated soils and sediments all along the Milwaukee River downstream from Lincoln Park. And so I've kind of flipped the map on its side here, but to the left here is north, and so Lincoln Park is down in this area, but then all the way down here you see these greenish areas that are labeled FP, with a number, and those are all the floodplains that US EPA is looking at how to deal with contamination in those areas. So they're working on a design right now. We're expecting to see a draft design in the summer of this year, and then potentially beginning construction as early as sometime in 2027, or maybe 2028. And the duration is expected to be 4 or 5 years. So I just want people to be aware of this. It is going to be a dramatic effort that's happening in the river. So watch for updates. Feel free to review documents, come to open houses just to learn more about that. And you can watch for updates on the Milwaukee Waterways Partnership website, which is shown there. Although the biggest part of restoring the area of concern is the sediment cleanup, we also recognize that it isn't enough to just remove toxins from our rivers. We also need healthy rivers to be full of fish and wildlife. So there is funding available to improve habitat in and along the river. And one of the areas where we'll be doing that is in Lincoln Park. Before we dive into the ways in which we hope to improve the habitat in the river, it helps to understand a little bit about why the river is the way it is today. Because frankly, when you look at the river in an aerial photo or on a map, it looks very different from a natural river. So like this photo is from 1937, and this is the Lincoln Park area. And what you see is this big, sweeping, what we call these Oxbow bends in the river. And that's, a very natural form that you see in rivers. But there was some concern, my understanding, concern about flooding because the river moved very slowly through this area. And so an effort was made to kind of get the water moving through here more quickly. And the way that was done was basically by connecting and cutting through here so water could quickly get down through here and out and continue on its way. And then this area was widened as well. So that created this center channel that is similar to what we see today. But then there was also a dam that was in place, the Estherbrook Dam, which backed up water and filled this area with a little bit deeper water. Now, that dam also trapped quite a bit of sediment, as you'll see in one of the next slides. But the dam was determined to be in need of repairs, and so it was required to be drawn down. So then the area looked like this. And then there was, concern about contamination in some of the sediments that had been trapped by the dam. So these, the sediments in these areas that you can see that are exposed were tested, and sure enough, they were found to contain high levels of contamination. And so there was a big effort to remove that contamination. And in 2012, this area in what we refer to as the West Oxbow was, dredged, or sediment was removed from that area. And then in 2015, what you can see in this photo is the effort to remove the contamination from this center channel. So they had blocked off flow from that area. They had also sampled in what we refer to as the East Oxbow, but the sediments in that side were not high enough that they needed to be removed at the time. So then after the sediment was removed from the West Oxbow and the East Oxbow, and the center channel, the river was sort of still like over widened, and it was dug out pretty deep. And so what it functioned as was really just like a big sediment trap for new material, new sand and gravel and silt that was coming down the river. So over time, this center channel has filled in quite a bit. You can see some exposed sandbars developing here and along the edges up in these areas. And over in the West Oxbow, there's quite a bit of silt and mud. It's really not supporting any plants coming up in there, but also no deep pools that are good habitat for fish. We also have this deposit in this area that has become vegetated and is quite stable now. And we know that that's also, exacerbating ice jams and debris jams in the area. A team of fish and wildlife experts considered how best to improve habitat in this reach. These are some of the ideas and proposals that they came up with. And a major one is to increase the amount of what we call emergent wetland for fish spawning. And so emergent wetland is basically where there's shallow water, but so it's shallow enough where plants can come up out of the water or emerge. And so you see standing water, but also plants that are coming out of that. A second objective is to increase habitat for turtles, including basking areas and nesting areas. There's an objective to increase water depths where possible, because fish need some deeper pools to hide in and forage for fish. And that objective also ties in well with some paddling objectives that we've heard, and so we'll talk a bit more about that too. An additional habitat enhancement that we've talked about is removing some of the rock that is armoring the banks where possible. So there's a lot of this large, what we call riprap. It's this very angular rock that if you've been in the park and tried to crawl down the bank, it's quite treacherous to walk on, but it's also a challenge for turtles and some other wildlife as they're trying to climb out of the river. As we started this project, we, of course, were consulting with fish and wildlife experts, but we also wanted to hear from the local community of people that use and love the park, just to make sure we understood what their interests are, so we can certainly not interfere with people's use of the park, but improve it to the extent that we can through these habitat enhancements. And I want to just point out a couple of things. Certainly with the paddling and water access, there was concern about low water levels due to the deposition of a lot of sand and silts in both the main channel, but also in the West Oxbow. There's also, a lot of concern or interest really in improving access, especially on the West Oxbow, coming from that side of the park down to the river. It's a really steep bank full of riprap that's really treacherous to get down. And so people felt kind of disconnected from the river on that side. I also wanted to note that we did hear a lot of support for increasing the native water plants, which are really good for fish and wildlife habitat, and also support some pollinators. But we did hear people express some concern about just making sure that we didn't completely choke out paddling access as well with a lot of vegetation. We also, heard some maintenance and safety concerns, as well as, requests for some different infrastructure. And while we can't do a lot with that, with this project, we have shared that with county parks. This exhibit shows a lot of the habitat improvements that we're proposing. And I'll just walk through these. So, I mentioned this new island up here that is a concern for debris and ice jams that can back up water. We'd like to remove that and improve the flow of water through this area, and then reuse that material to build out this wetland bench on this side of this island. So, and then by narrowing up the river through here, that should improve the movement of some of this sand and silt through that area. So we think that will go a long way to improving the depth through this area. We want to improve areas for fish spawning, and this area in the East Oxbow seemed like a good opportunity to do that. So, when in the spring, when the fish are spawning, this area floods. But it's really densely vegetated with invasive cattails. So we will be looking at making some, improvements to the vegetation, and maybe also cutting some channels or deepening these areas a little bit. There's several areas where we are proposing some new sand and gravel bars and some additional turtle nesting areas. So, on the backside of this island is a good opportunity for that here as well, and then also in this area. Several areas where we're talking about removing some of that riprap and then flattening those banks. And again, that will be better for humans accessing the water, but also better for wildlife crawling up the banks. And in this area, we're going to see, I don't know if we can do this, but we're going to talk with DNR about whether or not we can push some of that material out to kind of create a new peninsula there that provide more edge habitat, but also provide a place where people can get down and explore. Over in this area, we'd like to remove some of that really invasive buckthorn, which, it tends to crowd out native vegetation, and so it would be great habitat enhancement. But it also is, blocking views of the river. And so that was something that we heard a lot on a recent walk that we did with community members. So proposing to add a lot more wood structure to the river in a number of places. So these natural logs are really great for habitat for a lot of different species. So you can kind of see this shows the underwater and above water of, a log that is basically in the river part way. So if you look down here, this provides cover for lots of little fish. It provides, a hard surface for little larval insects to colonize that also provide food for fish. They can provide basking areas for turtles, perching areas for birds. So they also create kind of these deeper pools as the water flows, past these. It kind of creates this turbulence that, create some deeper pools. So that's also really helpful. These structures can be really simple. Like this is an example, and this is actually an engineering drawing, but it can be as simple as like one sort of tree or log that is lying down flat along the bank and extends into the water, with some, other like logs that are pushed into the soil to brace it. So obviously we don't want these structures to be picked up and washed downstream during high flows. And so there is a lot of, engineering and thinking that goes into keeping them in place. It can also be quite complex. So this is a wood jam that has quite a lot more pieces stuck into it. And this is just kind of in looking at it from above. And this is the view of it from the side, but you can see there's several layers of logs, and a lot of it is buried in part just to keep it in place. So even though it looks like a big structure, there's not a whole lot that's exposed. But we do want to be mindful that, these can be hazards for paddlers too. And so we'll use some of this, these types of structures, but, we'll be considering paddling interests as well with their placement. And this is a photo of what a engineered log structure might look like when it's really built in the river. So, you've got a log going along here, you've got the root mass that extends down into the water, providing that cover, providing that turbulence to create a pool, an area for, a turtle to crawl up or multiple turtles to crawl up on this and bask. Areas for birds to perch, all along here. And these are those logs that are sort of pressed in vertically in order to brace the structure. So overall, a really sort of complex habitat element that provides a lot of benefits. We expect to finish the design of this project by this fall. And then we'll be applying for funding for construction probably later this year, hoping to secure a funding commitment in 2027, but it might be later than that. And construction in maybe as soon as 2028, maybe later than that, all depending on the availability of funds. So there's plenty of time to give us your feedback. And so we encourage you to use our online form, which there's the long address for that shown there. But if you're watching this video from our website, it's on the very same page if you scroll down. The design of this project is funded with a generous grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency through their Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And we're working very closely with the Department of Natural Resources as well as Milwaukee County Parks. And with that, I thank you for your interest. I encourage you to send us your thoughts and look forward to improving habitat in Lincoln Park very soon. Thank you.